President Donald Trump issued an ultimatum to NATO allies in a letter Saturday, saying the U.S. will issue major sanctions on Russia only when they agree to do the same and stop buying oil from Russia. Meeting Trump's demands would mark a major shift among the alliance, and there are major questions as to whether there would be collective interest in taking these steps. I am ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing, and when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia, he said in a post to social media, quoting what he said was a letter sent to his NATO counterparts. He continued, "As you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil, by some, has been shocking. It greatly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. Anyway, I am ready to go when you are. Just say when." The president also called on NATO countries to significantly ramp up tariffs on China in a show of force. "I believe that this, plus NATO, as a group, placing 50% to 100% tariffs on China, to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine is ended, will also be of great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war," he said. Trump added that Russia's war in Ukraine would end quickly if those steps were taken. CNN has reported that the European Union imposed a ban on maritime Russian oil imports and refined oil products like diesel, but many countries continue to import Russian fossil fuels and liquefied natural gas. The president has repeatedly previewed the possibility of additional sanctions on Russia, telling Fox News, Fox and Friends on Friday he's considering hitting very hard with sanctions to banks and having to do with oil and tariffs also. He has already doubled tariffs to 50% on India, which purchases oil from Russia, and acknowledged Friday the move caused a rift with the country. India has argued that it's being unfairly targeted with the tariff increase, calling it unjustified, given that other nations also do business with Moscow. It remains unclear whether NATO countries will take these steps, which would mark a dramatic departure from their existing tariff policies. Earlier this week, when the president spoke with a European delegation from the EU, he pushed them to put 50 to 100% tariffs on both China and India, according to people familiar with the conversation. But notably, Trump's missive to his NATO counterparts on Saturday did not mention India. The EU is in final stages of negotiating a trade deal with India, so it was unlikely they would go along with that. Russia was the largest supplier of petroleum to the EU prior to Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The EU has since imposed a ban on maritime Russian oil imports, as well as refined oil products like diesel. As a result, oil imports to Europe fell to $1.72 billion, 1.48 billion euros, for the first quarter of 2025, down from $16.4 billion, 14.06 billion euros in the same quarter of 2021, according to the most recent data from Eurostat. The EU has slightly reduced Russia's market share of liquefied natural gas imports since 2021, from 22% down to 19% in 2025, while also greatly increasing the US market share. And the bloc, which has been the Americans' partner in sanctions against Russia, imported $41.9 billion, 36 billion euros of goods from Russia in 2024, data from the EU's statistics agency shows. European officials said last week, after the Trump meeting, that new tariffs on China or India were unlikely, since that's not how they approach the use of tariffs. And the Europeans have generally been more cautious in trade wars, in particular with China. By issuing his Russian oil ultimatum to NATO instead of the EU, Trump is including Turkey, which is the third largest purchaser of Russian oil after China and India, in those demands. The EU has largely cut off oil purchases, with exceptions for Hungary and Slovakia, but Turkey is still a customer, underscoring the steep demands. Momentum to end the war around Trump's August 15th meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska has largely stalled, and Trump's latest demands risk prolonging the conflict even further. Time is a valuable commodity for Putin, giving Russia the ability to make more gains on the battlefield and shore up control over occupied areas. Russia, meanwhile, is showing few signs it is interested in de-escalation. Romania's defense ministry said it intercepted a drone that entered its airspace while Russia attacked Ukraine. 2 F-16 fighter jets detected the drone while monitoring the air situation at the border with Ukraine, where Russia was carrying out aerial attacks. The Romanian pilots tracked the drone until it dropped off the radar approximately 20 kilometers southwest of Chilia Vech, a community along the Danube River and on the Romania-Ukraine border. The drone did not fly over populated areas or pose an imminent threat to the population, the ministry said, adding that teams are ready to search for possible debris from the device. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the drone had operated in NATO airspace for around 50 minutes. The Russian military knows exactly where their drones are headed and how long they can operate in the air. Their routes are always calculated. This cannot be a coincidence, a mistake, or the initiative of some lower-level commanders. It is an obvious expansion of the war by Russia, Zelensky wrote on X. The interception in Romania follows a significant incursion of Russian drones in Polish airspace earlier this week. After that incident, NATO announced the beginning of an operation to bolster the security of its eastern flank. Trump told reporters at the White House Thursday the move could have been a mistake. But regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation, but hopefully it's going to come to an end. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphatically stated on Saturday the incursion into Poland was unacceptable and unfortunate and dangerous development. As he said, the U.S. is still assessing whether those drones were intended to go into NATO airspace. It shouldn't happen. I don't think anybody's happy about it seeing happen. You saw NATO respond to it appropriately. We don't want to see it happen again, Rubio told reporters as he prepared to depart for Israel. CNN has reached out to the White House for comment on the incursion into Romania. Poland's armed forces also launched aviation operations due to drone strikes in regions of Ukraine that border Poland. The operation was preventive in nature, the operational command of the Polish armed forces said. Lublin Airport temporarily paused operations while the aircraft were deployed, Poland's aviation agency reported. Zelensky said that Russian drones had entered Ukraine through Belarusian airspace.